You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello, and welcome to another fascinating episode of Business Wealth Impact. Today, we have a wonderful guest. Laura is an author, podcast host, neonatal intensive care nurse, and traumatic brain injury survivor, whose focus is empowering others to shift their mindset, heal their nervous system, and nurture their body to reduce stress and achieve calm and happier lives. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me, John. I'm really excited to be here.
Me too. I'm going to dig right into this. I was so fascinated with your story because I feel like there's just so much you've learned that you can share with others. So let's get right into it. You had this traumatic brain injury, right? And tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So it was just a complete freak accident where I was playing with one of my friend's kids, spinning her around, fell backwards, landed on the back of my head. And as someone who was a nurse, I kind of thought nothing of it. I thought I was okay. Things were okay. It couldn't have been that serious. However, that quickly escalated. And what ended up happening was I had a skull fracture, a traumatic brain injury, and I had significant brain bleeds on top of my brain that were going to kill me basically within a day. That required emergency brain surgery. So I went from this moment of, seemingly normal life to suddenly, being faced with, I'm having to have brain surgery and I don't know if I'm going to wake up. And thankfully the surgery itself went well, but I thought that was going to be the worst of it. However, it wasn't. That's when, complications after complications continued to happen for me. And I really hit rock bottom where I was just in this constant state of just wishing to no longer be alive. I was so overwhelmed with anxiety, with sadness, with the unknown. And it just took me to this really dark place. And thankfully, during my recovery, I had this just light bulb moment of, wow, if I don't change, my mindset and the way I'm looking at this and really start believing that I can heal, then I am going to die. And that was just the moment where everything in my life completely changed for the better.
Okay, so under duress, you were forced to understand certain things in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was essentially the first time in my life where I was forced to really have to sit with myself and my thoughts and what I was really telling myself and believing about myself. And it was really harsh. It was really painful. And I was used to, through work and all kinds of other things, escaping that as much as possible. And this was that moment where I realized, wow, something's got to change because this isn't working for me. And I kind of can't go back. And so the only way moving forward for me was healing my mindset, healing my anxiety. And a lot of that really stemmed out of a lot of significant trauma healing as well.
So there were certain things that were happening before the trauma that also got bundled in and were cured. Is
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's wild. 3 to 4 years prior, I got divorced. I broke my back. I broke my back again. I had a blood clot in my lung. I had all these weird health problems for someone who is seemingly healthy. And I think that these were really just kind of these moments where my body was trying to give me this wake up call of, hey, the life you're living is not sustainable. I was working overtime constantly. I was just an adrenaline junkie. I was over exercising and just not taking care of myself in any way. And I was just really on this, seemingly outwardly good path. But in actuality, it was just breaking me down in every way possible. And the brain injury is really what required that true hard stop of me for me to even really recognize how kind of severe my life had evolved to be in a lot of respects.
How long did the whole brain injury, process take?
So it was a full year of really consistent, rehabbing, speech therapy, occupational therapy, doing all those things, doing a lot of, work on myself at home. But it was just a lot of moments where it was incredibly hard. And it was just this constant state of the unknown. I didn't know if I was going to be able to learn how to fully speak again or do basic math or be able to tolerate, noise and being in public and everything. But I just had to constantly remind myself that if I don't believe that I can heal and get through this, then I'm not going to. And so I just kept utilizing just so much hope and belief and faith in myself and my ability to heal. And so after about 6 months, I had mostly fully regained my
Hmm.
speech. I was able to do math, do all those things. But that was really when I realized that I needed to step away from nursing because it was overwhelming. It was a lot. It was a lot of stimulation. It was a lot for my brain. But also, I really needed to kind of come to terms with myself and really learn why I had even brought myself to this path in the first place and how I could kind of start shifting that to kind of live a happier and healthier life.
Mm. So also neonatal care intensive unit, that must have been pretty stressful on an ongoing basis.
Extremely. And, it was just something that was so normalized to me because I had been a NICU nurse for almost 10 years. So seeing everything that I saw and had to experience, which was incredibly traumatic, it was just so normalized to me. And so I was just so used to living and working in this high stress environment that it became my baseline. And while it was not a great baseline to have, frankly,
Mm.
it was something that I was just so used to. I didn't even recognize how anxious I was feeling, how stressed my body was, how much my body was trying to signal to me that I'm not well, but I just kept kind of pushing past it.
Right. Now, it's so interesting what you said about over exercising because everybody's saying we should do as much exercise as possible. And I feel like there are some people that are literally killing themselves with exercise, and more is not always better. So that's very interesting you brought that up because we don't see that as a problem, but anything in excess is a problem. So, how much were you exercising per day?
It was pretty extreme. I was a big fan of anything high intensity. That was just basically kind of the general theme of my life for a long time. But there were multiple times within a week where I was working on night shift, so also not ideal for your body or your
Hmm.
brain. But so I would, work a bunch of night shifts in a row. I would go home. I would sleep for 4 hours. Then I would go do a
Oh,
high intense strength training workout with my personal trainer, and then I'd go home and eat dinner, and then I would or eat lunch, and then I would go to a spin class in the same day. Like I was just go, 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 go,
oh,
go.
wow.
And I was just, it had just become my baseline of normal to where I didn't even recognize how exhausted I felt. And learning, especially
Yeah.
through my brain injury and whatnot, where I was just in this constant state of exhaustion, where I was not really super functional. However,
Mm.
I was so used to just tuning out of my body and
Hmm.
just, you know, having caffeine or just go, go, go. And you just keep going. You
Hmm.
don't nap. You're always on the go and always doing
Mm.
tasks and always in that kind of frame of mind and
Hmm.
body, essentially. But I realized I was like, well, this is obviously not something that I'm capable of doing. But it was so hard to rewire myself and retrain myself away from it. But then as I've been able to
Hmm.
do that, which I'll be honest, that was among the more challenging recovery pieces, was really learning how to sit and relax and be
Yes.
quiet and calm and all the
Mm.
beauty of what that does for you. But wow, it's
Hmm.
been just quite a shift just away from that previous lifestyle.
Right. Well, most people wouldn't even be able to do that much exercise with so little sleep. They would not be able to actually do it. So that's incredible that you sustained that because most people would be like, oh, I'm exhausted. I can't even go any further. But you were, I guess you were not listening so much. You convinced yourself. They say if you tell yourself you're tired, you will be. And if you don't, you won't. So you were just like, I'm not tired. Okay. So now, what are you doing now that's the shift? What is this mindset secret now that you have? Which I know you're teaching other people now. We'll talk about that later. But what do you do now that's different?
I mean, it's almost night and day. It's such a dramatic difference because before I was just in this constant place of trying to tune out of my thoughts just because it was so much fear based and anxiety driven and negative. So I was just constantly doing to kind of overcome that. Whereas
Mm.
now my life is just so much slower. It is so much more focused on tuning into myself, to how I feel. And also when those thoughts do come up or those anxious feelings, because of course they do, I
Hmm.
am able to manage them. Whereas before I would just try and bury them and move
Mm.
forward and just do as a means of, problem solving, which in reality, that doesn't solve any problems. The way, our mind works and our bodies, if we're not processing our feelings, they don't just go away. They stay there and they
Hmm.
build and they come out in different ways. So for me, it's gotten to be really in touch with how I'm actually feeling, giving myself that adequate time. For me, a lot of that is meditating, journaling, and just taking
Mm.
moments throughout my day to just sit and pause, whether that's, outside or just
Hmm.
inside, just sitting and staring at the wall for a second, just to give
Hmm.
myself an opportunity to really tune in and check in with myself. Because I think oftentimes societally we're pressured to just, you have to keep going. We have to do so much. And in
Hmm.
reality, that's not a fun way of living. It leads to more stress. It leads to more anxiety. And that's just not
Mhm.
something I'm willing to do anymore.
Right. Now, some people thrive on that, but even the people that thrive on that, like I like doing a lot of stuff, but I definitely take time off to just sit and look at the bay sometimes. They're doing nothing. And you should at least spend 15 minutes a day where you're just not doing anything and not planning. Um, a lot of high achievers have figured that out, how to take vacations. I know I do, and take weekends off. And, it doesn't take much to rejuvenate ourselves. It really
Exactly.
doesn't take that much. Okay, great. So now what is your life like now? You went back to nursing part time, but
Mhm.
this is not something that you want to get back into full time, right?
Correct. I've recognized that right now I'm able to have this great balance of I still love working in the NICU. I love taking care of premature babies. I love
Hmm.
challenging myself with critical thinking and in that type of environment. However, to a point, working in a hospital is incredibly stressful. It's incredibly hard on
Hmm.
our bodies, and
Hmm.
it's not an environment that I want to immerse myself in the way that I had before. So for me, a
Mm.
lot of my time now is spent. I'm a big nerd in a lot of ways, I'll say, but I have spent a lot of time learning about various different, therapies and tools and strategies
Hmm.
to heal our mindset, to do a lot of unconscious mind work as well. I'm currently doing rapid resolution therapy training, and I've done
Hmm.
a lot of somatic therapies and learning about that as well, because really just it's also interconnected, I think, our minds and bodies. And we oftentimes just get so tuned into our thoughts and we forget how we feel, or we get, so overwhelmed by our feelings that we're not able to balance the two. So for me, a lot of
Mm.
my current journey has been just immersing myself as much as in as much of this as possible, so that I'm able to use my story and the tools that I've learned to help other people. Because if people are living like I was, which I know they are, it's painful. It's hard. I had such low self-worth. I was living in this constant state of just always on edge and fear and worried and future oriented thinking, where I
Mm.
couldn't enjoy the moment. There was no, present for me. It was all just future fears or past fears and just
Mm.
a combination of all of it. So for me, just being able to share my story and help others learn that they don't have to live that way has been incredibly powerful for me.
So would you say that your brain injury was actually a blessing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wholeheartedly. It was absolutely needed to happen, because truly, I think I would have burned myself to the ground, and something else catastrophic would have happened to my health. And who knows if that would have been the same wake up call that this was and needed to be for me. But going from
Mm.
this, constant overachiever, working more overtime than anyone else in my unit, and, never sleeping, just go, 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 feeling that I always needed this external validation and external success and people telling me
Mm.
that I'm successful, for me to actually believe
Hmm.
that, to be able to shift away from that to now being able to recognize my own success and actually feel that within for the first time,
Hmm.
has been
Yes.
just such an incredible shift.
That is incredible. And the fact that you were actually, when it happened, you were actually taking a moment to play with a child. I find that ironic that that happened not when you were go, go, going, when you were actually having a moment,
Right.
right? Kind of
Right.
ironic.
I know.
So it would be like, well, I was having a moment and look what happened.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have just been at the gym. So it's pretty ironic. I'm sure that you see the irony in that yourself.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, during my healing recovery time, those thoughts would just be on a constant loop in my mind of, well, if I hadn't been doing, and all those
Mm.
things, just kind of torturing myself in that way. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's just such a wild time to think about, but glad that it happened.
Mm. Okay, so what's one tool that you help people with to get them out of their anxiety?
So for me, I think the baseline most important thing for everybody is having awareness, because so often, like I said, we're thinking about the future. We're constantly focused on goals, work, life, what we have to do, laundry, so many things. But
Mm.
we really lose touch with how we're actually feeling and what we're actually thinking about. So I think the first start to shifting, anxiety, negativity, processing trauma and healing really just does come down to awareness. Because if you're not aware of just your routine thought patterns or your routine, feelings or lack thereof, if you're tuning out of them, then there's no real way to assess kind of where you are and how you're able to grow and shift. And so I think often it's wild. I believe the statistic is we have 60,000 thoughts in a day. 80% are negative and 90% are habit. And it just
Mhm.
really speaks to the fact that we're just constantly on this habitual loop of what we do and go, go, go. And if we don't take those moments to really tune in and say, is this a thought that I think about myself? Is this a thought I think about my identity? Is this something I actually believe? Or is this just something that's
Hmm.
become so habitual that
Hmm.
I'm just choosing to believe it, or I think I have to believe it when it's not reality?
Mm. Habit is, well, habit is so strong.
Mhm.
And as you said, we have to decide to create new habits or break old ones,
Absolutely.
right? So the creating of the new, it's hard.
Oh, extremely.
Most people don't want to do that because they're like, they're fine. Now, interestingly enough, your book is called No, I'm Not Fine, Thank You.
Yes. Yes.
Which
And
I love.
it was a very necessary title because I think that it really speaks to society these days. We're all just constantly saying we're fine, we're holding it in, or we're just
Hmm.
so out of touch with really how we do feel and what's going on, or we don't want to burden others. We think if we talk about our
Mm,
feelings that we're burdening other people, but we're often just saying we're fine. And throughout my brain injury, I kept saying I was fine when I clearly wasn't.
mm,
And so I think
mm.
just kind of even just those subtle tweaks to our language to show, hey, like I'm not okay. And that's also okay. And it's okay to talk about it and it's okay to work through and kind of share that relatability with others as well, I think is incredibly significant too.
Right. I think there was a book called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. Do you know
Yeah,
that book?
right.
Does your
Yeah.
book have some, I don't know, similarities that to the other book?
So, yeah, in a general sense. So, really, my book dives into my traumatic brain injury, how that was kind of the deep dive into exploring trauma, but also the previous 5 years where I experienced, a painful divorce. I had a lot of health problems, a
Mm,
lot of unknowns,
mm,
and all the anxiety I battled with. And then I go deeper into my childhood and all of the trauma that kind of began there. But really, the main focus is talking about my healing and how I've been able to move forward through,
mhm,
the struggles of my inner critic, my anxiety, my low self worth, all of the trauma that really created the person that I came to be, and how I was able to move forward and shift through that. And it's really honest. And if you had told me, back in 2021 or whenever that I was going to write a book sharing my deepest, darkest struggles and vulnerability, I would have never believed it. But I think it's just incredibly important. And the more we talk about topics like this and really share how we feel, the more people feel empowered to do the same and really speak about themselves as well.
Absolutely. We can't help other people if we're faking. We
Yeah.
can't help other people if we're not honest about like what we've been through. So tell me a little bit about your childhood. It sounds like the trauma started before that led you to that high pressurized lifestyle. So what do you think led you there without blaming parents? But there is stuff that happened, right?
Absolutely. So I don't blame my parents for any of it. I think,
Hmm.
frankly, so there were a couple significant incidences. I did have, in particular, I had a near drowning incident as a small child.
Hmm.
There was an abuse traumatic event as well. But really, I think my core trauma stemmed out of lack of safety, feeling at an early
Mm,
age, given some of those circumstances, and then also growing up in a really high achieving environment where
mm,
academics were really important at a really young age, sports success. It was really kind of just culturally driven into the area that I grew up, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. But
mhm,
it was just this constant state of internally not feeling safe, not feeling good enough, feeling like I'm never doing enough and that I always have to do
mm,
more and kind of be on high alert. And that
mhm,
really just kind of interestingly shaped my childhood self. But also, I think that is what led me down the path of nursing as well, was this, constant need to, be empathetic and help others, but also just finding different avenues to kind of put others' needs before my own because I never felt that internal safety or just self worth within me.
mm. Okay. And this is a lot of people
Yeah.
come from backgrounds like that. And even when we don't come from a background like that, most people in America suffer from anxiety. It's the number one mental health issue, I believe, is
Oh, yeah.
anxiety. So, what got us here, do you think? Is it just all this change? Is it the pressure of being something in the world and making a living and having kids and being the man or being the woman? Because being human's hard.
Yeah.
Like it just is. Like, let's face it, it has to be said. Being human is hard. And every time I see a person, like, I wonder what their life story is. I wonder what I'd say that because you see them walking down the street. You're like, okay, I know nothing. What's their life story? They have struggles. And because I was an actress, so I'm always wondering about the psychology and the life of people that I see. It's like it fascinates me. But we just see the surface when we meet somebody. We have no idea what they're going through. But safe to say, most people are going through pretty hard stuff a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
So would you say that and so is one of your strategies just to be aware that you're anxious?
So that is a piece of it, but really the bulk of it comes down to the nervous system. I think we
Mhm.
do not learn how to adequately regulate our nervous system. And what I mean by that is, fight or flight, which most people are aware of.
Mhm.
Our sympathetic nervous system was intended to, keep us alive in, a life or death situation of like having to run from a lion, but it's not really needed per se in our day-to-day life currently. However, it's something that still exists within us. And we will respond, our nervous system will respond to emotional threats, future thinking, that stuff that's not even happening to us, in a
Mhm.
similar way. And so we will have these ramped up nervous system responses, and we're not taught how to, mitigate them or ways to calm ourselves down. So we're just
Mm.
constantly living in this chronically stressed out life where we're all kind of doing this together. And then we have all these external pressures from others that just adds more. And I think there's just so many different elements of stressors that just keep building. And we're all just so chronically stressed. And that's just
Mhm.
become so normal that we don't really know how to deal with it, or the ways that we do cope with it are not necessarily effective, like alcohol, drugs, TV, phones, things to kind of shift away. So I think when we start tuning in and recognizing, okay, my nervous system is responding in this way, which makes me, feel more anxious. However, this is actually my body trying to protect me. And I can use different tools like meditation, deep breathing,
Mm.
walking, being outside, being in
Mhm.
nature, listening to music to bring myself down so I don't have to stay at the state. And the more we do
Mhm.
that, the easier it is to be calm, the easier it is to stay calm, and the easier it is to bring yourself down from a high stress moment, a panic attack, and things like that.
Mm. It is so interesting to me that through my life, over and over, over and over and over and over again, the key to everything is breath. Like that is just for years and years and years, and all the modalities that I've done, it's always gets down to breathe and meditate. And breathing is a meditation. It really
Absolutely.
is about breath because breath creates mindfulness. Um, and we can't get away from that. That really is the key, I think.
Oh, I completely agree.
But yeah, all sorts of breath work or meditation or this kind of breath work or that kind of breath work or, healing chiropractic, which is about breath. Really, that's the key. And if
Oh,
you're
yeah.
doing exercise, you're also breathing. So really is just about getting breath into our bodies, correct?
Completely correct. And, our breath really does a lot of signaling to our mind and our nervous system to tell us, is it okay to calm down? Can we, start regulating our nervous system to a more parasympathetic state, which is our more calm intended baseline? Or if we start breathing more shallow, that sends signals to our brain and our nervous system that, maybe we are unsafe. Maybe we do need to be on high alert. And our
Mhm.
breath really does do so much to signal within our minds and bodies, but also to bring us to this calm present state that I think really nothing else can do quite the same. And it's something you can do anywhere, which I think is the most important thing to
Mhm.
emphasize, is that you can do it in the car, or you can do it in public at the grocery store, you can do it at home. It's something that can be done to settle and calm yourself in any situation.
Right. I mean, anybody can stand anywhere and just say, okay, I'm going to do my breath.
Mhm.
In the middle of shopping, you could stand in the aisle and go, okay, I'm going to do 1 minute of breathing.
Right.
In the car is easy. Yeah. Okay. Fascinating. So tell me, how big do you want to get this movement? It sounds like you want to create a movement and help people. What is your vision? What's next for Laura?
So, great question. This is something, it's stuff that I want to scream from the rooftops because I think it's so incredibly important. And it's a lot of, seemingly basic information and tools, but that makes such a significant difference that so few people are aware of. So, I'm currently creating an online course that will come out in July. That is really it's called Foundations of Healing the Mind and Body. And it's really just utilizing all kinds of different tools, excuse me, to be able to connect more with ourselves and be able to
Mhm.
be more calm and have less stress and actually enjoy life more and be present, because I think that's incredibly important. So through my book, my podcast, social media, through this course, I really am just trying to expand outward in as many palatable ways for people to really get this information, because I think it is so important and it's been so incredibly life changing for me. And I think if I have been able to heal the level of trauma and anxiety that I
Mm.
have lived with over 30 or over 3 decades of my life, anyone can do it. And I think that's so incredibly
Mm.
important to know as well.
I think it is important. I think it's important that when somebody is showing us something, that if they can do it, we can do it.
Yeah,
Because it's one thing if somebody's been to Ivy League schools and they're from a rich family and they got trainers and they got this. And it's like, well, I don't have all that. But what you're saying is like, if you can do it because you had such a history of it and the traumatic brain injury, which obviously didn't make this easier for you as far as like starting it because you had
right.
all this other healing to do. Anyone, I agree, anyone can do it, right? You're just
Absolutely.
going to show people the way. Okay, we'll have a link to that in our show notes. So what's some before we, say goodbye for now, what is something that you want to share with people, like the most important thing that you've learned that could just the information they can use right now?
The most important thing that I've learned has definitely been that we take for granted, our day-to-day life, how we feel. We're just constantly thinking about, the stuff we have to do and seemingly unimportant things that we make so incredibly important that add so much stress and anxiety. But really what I think is the most important thing that everything comes down to is how you feel. If you don't feel good, if you're constantly doing this stuff for other people, for external validation, because you are unable to, really feel good about yourself inside, then none of that other stuff matters. I think it really just comes down to really getting in touch with ourselves, because what's the point if we're not actually happy? What's the point of having a successful career if you're miserable? What's the point of having all the money if, you're just constantly on edge all day? So I think being able to find that peace and calmness and happiness within ourselves instead of from the outside world and external validation and all the external sources, I think that is the utmost most important thing that we can possibly do for ourselves.
I agree. But what about people that just have to go to a job they don't like because they're supporting their family? How do they work with this? Because, there's not everybody can just say, oh, well, I don't really love my job. I'm getting another one because they're supporting a family or themselves and they'd love to quit. What about people that can't leave the job they have, even though they absolutely hate it? How can you help them?
So that's such a great question, and I think incredibly important to
Hmm.
emphasize. I think it comes down to being able to reframe and find small ways that you can make it a little more positive or palatable or even enjoyable or even just neutral. Being able to take away the negative feelings, because if you're constantly dreading your job, that
Mm,
sucks. We've all had those moments, I'm sure, of having those experiences, and it's not fun. However, if you're able to reframe it in some way, just coming up with something that you can have gratitude for or be positive about, or be able to just find some small little wins out of, that is able to just start kind of creating these differences in your mind where you're just in general able to see more positives, able to feel more gratitude. And it just is able to expand outward through the power of our minds and neuroplasticity. So really just locking into those little things. And it can be seemingly small. Like I appreciate how my job, enables me to spend time with my family, and you just being able to slowly kind of build it like a snowball effect and finding these little wins for yourself will be able to pull away kind of some of that pain associated with it and negativity as well. But I can completely resonate with showing up to a job that you don't love and thinking that you have to do it and feeling stuck. And that's okay. That's, it's not always the best case scenario. However, being able to just do those subtle shifts to make it better for you,
mm.
I think is incredibly important to do.
So smart. And also, it can just be if you're saying, I just hate my job, I hate my job, I hate my job, everybody knows you hate it. You're emanating this negativity, and the job probably is not great to do. But even the people you're interacting with at work, you could try to change that relationship or shift that a little bit. Like you buy them a free coffee one morning, and they're like, oh, that would then shift something. Or something to do with micro parts of the job, like more relational. Maybe, there's no answer for some people who hate their jobs. But I do think the more we say, oh, I don't want to do this. And I've done that. And I'm like, wait a minute, what I'm doing is pretty fun. So I've found new fun in certain things that I didn't like in aspects of my business, even because it was just my
Absolutely.
idea of it. And I thought, this is actually not hard. Actually, I can make this fun. So I agree with that. Well, that's super. And it does have to be because it's very well and good to say, oh, change your life, shift this. Some people are thinking right now, yeah, but I can't leave this job.
Hmm.
How do I? So it's about micro shifts, right?
Absolutely. I think the micro shifts are really ultimately the key to making the big transformative shifts. And those little, just small, just nudging of the dial, every day, just consistently builds over time. And you'll be able to look back and see, wow, I do feel better. I, am able to enjoy my job or my life or whatever more. And that's definitely been a pivotal part of my journey and very significant in getting me to here.
And also, once you do that, your energy changes and you might attract a better job. So that's the
Yes,
other thing, right?
exactly.
Okay.
It all just
It all
builds.
just builds. Okay,
Mhm.
this has been wonderful. Laura, would you want to say verbally your website where you want people to be able to find you?
Absolutely, yeah. So my website, it's my first and last name, laurarenner.me, M-E. And on my website, I have, more information about me, about my book. I will soon have my course there as well. I also do have a free beginner's guide to trauma healing. And that's a resource guide of a lot of just different free resources that you can utilize online to kind of get the ball rolling with shifting your mindset, healing anxiety, and healing trauma.
Fantastic. I'm glad you have that. So people, seek out Laura. And thank you for listening to this episode. If you like this, please subscribe, please share, and we'll see you on the next episode. You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.